Jake Miller walked through the glass doors of the Coalition recruitment station. The building was huge, with white walls that reached high into the sky. Aliens and humans moved around everywhere. Some waited in long lines, others sat in chairs, reading information on glowing tablets. Jake looked around at the different species. There were tall, thin beings with blue skin and 4 arms. Small creatures that looked like walking rocks shuffled past him. In one corner, he saw beings made of pure light, talking to each other in musical sounds. A human woman in a blue uniform approached him. She had short brown hair and tired eyes. "Welcome to Earth Station 7. I'm Captain Lisa Hayes. Are you here to join the Coalition forces?" Jake nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "Jake Miller, former Marine Sergeant." Captain Hayes smiled. "Good to have you. Follow me to the medical station. We need to scan you first." They walked through several hallways filled with more waiting people. Jake passed, a group of young humans talking excitedly about space battles. A few older aliens watched them with what looked like amusement. The medical bay was quiet compared to the rest of the building. Strange machines lined the walls, each one humming with power. In the center stood a large silver device that looked like a metal tree. Its branches held different scanning tools. A 6-armed creature with a shell-like body stood next to the scanner. Its many eyes focused on Jake as he entered. "I am Zixka," it said in a clicking voice. "Place your hand on the scanning pad, please." Jake had been through medical scans before. This should be simple. He walked to the silver device and put his right hand on the glowing blue pad. The machine started its work. Lights ran up and down Jake's arm. The scanner made soft beeping sounds as it read his body. Other people in the room continued their conversations. Then everything stopped. The scanner's lights froze in place. The beeping became a long, steady tone. The blue glow under Jake's hand turned bright red. Zixka's 6 arms moved quickly over different controls. "This is unusual," the alien said. Its voice sounded confused. Captain Hayes stepped closer. "What's wrong?" The scanner suddenly spoke. Its voice was clear and mechanical. "Warning. Unprecedented scarring patterns detected in subject. Damage. Readings exceed known parameters for survival." People in the medical bay stopped talking. Aliens and humans turned to look at Jake and the machine. "Query," the scanner continued. "Has subject survived direct combat engagement with a deity-class entity?" The room went completely silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Captain Hayes stared at him with wide eyes. Zixka's shell clicked as it moved nervously. "The scanner has never asked such a question before," it whispered. A large, bear-like alien wearing gold stripes on its uniform came over. This was Admiral Korath, the station commander. Jake had seen beings like him before. They were called Ursani and were known for being strong warriors. "What did the machine mean by deity-class entity?" Admiral Korath asked. Jake looked at the scanner, then at the crowd of people watching him. He had hoped to avoid this conversation. 3 years of moving from planet to planet, trying to forget, and now this machine had given away his secret. "Something like that," Jake said quietly. Captain Hayes put her hand on his shoulder. "Jake, what exactly happened to you?" The scanner was still glowing red. More Coalition officers were gathering around them. Jake could see fear in some faces, curiosity in others. "The scars," Admiral Korath said, studying Jake carefully. "Show us." Jake sighed and rolled up his sleeves. His arms were covered in marks that didn't look like normal scars. Some seemed to move slightly when he wasn't looking directly at them. Others appeared to have depth that went beyond his skin, as if they continued into somewhere else entirely. A young human soldier gasped. "Those aren't from any weapon I know." "They're not from any weapon anyone knows," Jake said. "Not from this. Reality, anyway." Zixka was reading data from the scanner. "The machine says these scars exist in 11 different dimensions simultaneously. This should be impossible." Admiral Korath's large paws gripped Jake's shoulders. "Soldier, I need you to tell us everything. If you've truly faced a deity-class entity and survived, the Coalition needs to know about it." Jake looked around the room. Everyone was watching him. Humans, aliens, officers, and recruits. They all wanted answers to questions he had been trying not to think about for 3 years. It happened on Kepler 442b, Jake began. 3 years ago, I was stationed there, with my unit. Captain Hayes activated a recording device. Go on. The colony was peaceful. 60,000 people, mostly farmers. My wife Amy worked at the hospital. My daughter Sophie was 8 years old. Jake's voice became softer when he mentioned his family. Admiral Korath nodded. I remember Kepler 442b. It was completely destroyed. The official report said it was a natural disaster. That's what they told people, Jake said. The truth was much worse. The scanner finally stopped its red glow and returned to normal blue. But the damage was done. Everyone in the station now knew that Jake Miller was not just another veteran, looking to join the coalition. We need to talk privately, Captain Hayes said. Admiral Korath, should we use the secure briefing room? The large alien nodded. Yes, clear the area. This conversation is now classified. Security officers began moving people away from the medical bay. Recruits were told to continue their processing in other areas. Soon, only Jake, Captain Hayes, Admiral Korath, and a few senior officers remained. Jake knew there was no avoiding this now. He had kept his story secret for 3 years, but the scanner had made that impossible. Now he would have to remember everything, the battle, the creature, and the price he paid for victory. Before we go to the briefing room, Admiral Korath said, I need to ask you one more question. Jake waited. Did you win? Jake looked at his scarred hands, remembering fire that burned in colors that had no names, and a creature that had called itself a god. Yes, he said, but it cost me everything. The secure briefing room had thick metal walls and no windows. Jake sat at a metal table across from Captain Hayes and Admiral Korath. The room was cold and quiet. Only the soft hum of air systems broke the silence. Admiral Korath placed a recording device on the table. This conversation is classified at the highest level. What you tell us will not leave this room without your permission. Jake nodded. He had been dreading this moment for 3 years, but part of him felt relieved. Carrying the secret alone had been harder than the physical scars. Captain Hayes opened a file on her tablet. According to Coalition records, Kepler 442b was destroyed. By seismic activity, the entire planet became uninhabitable in less than 6 hours. That's the cover story, Jake said. The real cause was something the Coalition didn't want people to know about. Admiral Korath leaned forward. Tell us about this deity-class entity. Jake closed his eyes and tried to find the right words. How do you describe something that shouldn't exist? It appeared without warning, Jake began. I was doing patrol duty around the main settlement when the sky started to change color. Not like a sunset or storm clouds. The actual color of the sky became something I had never seen before. Captain Hayes made notes on her tablet. What did this entity look like? It was huge, maybe 300 feet tall. Its body seemed to be made of living shadow, but there were parts that burned with starfire. It had too many arms, and its face. Jake stopped talking for a moment. Its face was always changing. Sometimes it looked human, sometimes alien, sometimes like nothing at all. Admiral Korath's large paws drummed on the table. What did it want? It called itself Vexthol the World Render. It said our sector belonged to it now, that all life in this area of space was its property. Jake's hands clenched into fists. It started killing people immediately, not quickly. It seemed to enjoy causing fear and pain. Captain Hayes looked up from her tablet. Where were the orbital defenses, the Coalition fleet? Gone in the first 5 minutes, Jake said. Vexthol pointed at our defense platforms and they just stopped existing, not destroyed. They became nothing, like they had never been built. Jake stood up and walked to the wall. The metal was cold against his palm. The closest Coalition fleet was 4 days away. Admiral Chen tried to get ships to us faster, but this thing could bend space around the planet. Nothing could get in or out. Admiral Korath made a low growling sound. How many people were on the colony? 60,000 when it started. Within 2 hours, That number was down to 20,000. Vexthul wasn't just killing people, it was feeding on their terror. Jake turned back to face them. My unit was stationed near the evacuation center. We had orders to protect the civilians while they loaded onto emergency shuttles. How many Marines were with you? Captain Hayes asked. 12. Good soldiers, all of them. Corporal Danny Rodriguez had been with me for 2 years. Private Kelly. Wright was new but brave. Sergeant Pete Johnson was 3 weeks from retirement. Jake's voice became quieter. They all died fighting that thing. The room was silent for a long moment. Admiral Korath poured water from a pitcher into 3 cups and offered one to Jake. Tell us about the battle, the Admiral said gently. Jake drank some water and sat back down. At first we tried standard tactics. We had heavy weapons, explosives, even a few plasma cannons from the guard post. Did they work? Captain Hayes asked. Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. Our bullets passed right through it. The plasma cannons made it glow brighter for a few seconds, but that was all. It was like trying to fight a thunderstorm with a pocket knife. Admiral Korath nodded. But you kept fighting. What else could we do? There were still 15,000 people trying to get to the shuttles. Amy was helping load wounded civilians. Sophie was in the children's group waiting for her turn. Jake's scarred hands traced patterns on the metal table. Vexthul seemed amused by us at first. It would let us shoot at it, then laugh. Its laugh sounded like stars dying. When did that change? Captain Hayes asked. When we started using the colony's industrial equipment as weapons, the mining charges, the construction mechs, the fusion cutters from the shipyard. These things were built to work with dangerous materials, and they could actually hurt Vexthul. Jake remembered the first time they had made the creature angry. Its roar had shattered windows 5 miles away. Rodriguez figured out how to rig the mining equipment to explode in sequence. We lured Vexthul into the mining zone and set off enough charges to level a mountain. Admiral Korath looked impressed. Did it work? It staggered. Maybe for 30 seconds. That was the first time we saw it bleed. Its blood was silver and it moved like it was alive. Captain Hayes was writing quickly. What happened to your men during this fight? Jake's expression became pained. Johnson died in the first real attack. Vexthul hit him with some kind of energy beam that aged him 50 years in 5 seconds. Rodriguez lasted until the mining zone battle. The creature grabbed him and changed him. He became something else, something that attacked us. And Private, right? Captain Hayes asked softly. Kelly made it almost to the end. She was the one who helped me realize what we had to do to really hurt this thing. Jake stood up again and walked around the room. The conventional weapons, even the industrial equipment, they could only damage Vexthul's physical form. But Kelly noticed something. Every time the creature fed on someone's fear, it became stronger. But when people fought back, when they showed courage instead of terror, it seemed to weaken slightly. Admiral Korath's eyes widened. It fed on fear. Exactly. And Kelly figured out that the opposite was also true. Human determination, love, the refusal to give up, these things were like poison to it. Captain Hayes looked confused. How can emotions affect a physical being? Vexthul wasn't entirely physical. It existed in multiple dimensions at once. Part of it lived in the realm of thoughts and feelings. That's why our normal weapons couldn't touch it properly. Jake sat back down and looked at his scarred hands. Kelly died figuring this out. She jumped directly at Vexthul, not trying to hurt it with weapons, but projecting every ounce of human stubbornness she had. The creature screamed when she touched it. That's when you knew how to fight it, Admiral Korath said. Jake nodded. By then, there were only 3,000 people left alive on the entire planet. The evacuation shuttles were almost loaded. Amy and Sophie were supposed to be on the next one. His voice broke slightly. But Vexthul had learned to counter our tactics. It started targeting the shuttles directly. I had to make a choice. Captain Hayes and Admiral Korath waited. I could try to protect the shuttles and probably fail, or I could attack Vexthul directly and give everyone else a chance to escape. Jake looked up at them. I chose to fight. Jake stared at the metal table for a long moment before continuing. Admiral Korath and Captain Hayes waited patiently. They could see this part of the story was the hardest for him to tell. I told Amy to get Sophie on the next shuttle, Jake said. She argued with me, said we should all leave together, but I knew someone had to keep Vexithol busy, or it would destroy all the evacuation ships. Captain Hayes leaned forward. How did you plan to fight something that had already killed thousands of people? I didn't have a plan, Jake admitted. Just an idea that Kelly had died to give me. If human emotions could hurt this thing, then maybe I could hurt it a lot. Jake stood and began pacing around the small room. I gathered every explosive device left on the colony. Mining charges, construction demolition packs, even homemade bombs that the engineers had rigged up. I loaded everything onto one of the heavy construction mechs. Admiral Korath made notes on his own tablet. You were going to ram it? That was just the beginning. The real weapon was going to be me. Jake stopped pacing and faced them. I spent 30 minutes thinking about everything I loved. Amy's smile when she got off work. Sophie's laugh when I pushed her on the swings. The way our house smelled like coffee and flowers every morning. His voice became stronger. Then I thought about every person Vexthol had killed, every family it had destroyed, every dream it had ended. I let that anger fill me up until I felt like I was going to explode. Captain Hayes was writing quickly. What happened when you attacked? I drove the mech straight at Vexthol. It was standing in the center of the main square, feeding on the fear of people trapped in the buildings around it. When it saw me coming, it laughed. Jake's scarred hands clenched into fists. The creature hit me with everything it had. Beams of energy that burned in 11 dimensions. Gravity waves that should have crushed me flat. Mental attacks that tried to fill my mind with terror. But you survived, Admiral Korath said. Barely. Every attack left scars that existed in multiple realities at once. I could feel parts of my soul being burned away, but I kept driving toward it. Jake rolled up his sleeves to show them the scars again. These marks aren't just on my body. They're carved into my existence itself. Some of them hurt in dimensions I can't even name. Captain Hayes touched one of the scars gently. It felt cold and seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. The explosives went off when I rammed the mech into Vexthol's legs, Jake continued. The blast knocked it down, but I knew that wouldn't be enough, so I jumped directly onto its body. You did what? Admiral Korath's eyes were wide. I climbed up its torso while it was trying to get back to its feet. Every step burned me. Its skin was made of living shadow and starfire. Touching it was like grabbing lightning. Jake walked to the wall and put his palms against the metal. Vexthol tried to grab me, but I was too small and moving too fast. It was used to fighting armies and fleets. It wasn't ready for one angry human with nothing left to lose. What did you do when you reached its head? Captain Hayes asked. I started hitting it, just punching it as hard as I could. My hands caught fire from touching its face, but I didn't stop. Jake turned back to them. That's when something strange happened. Vexthol stopped laughing. For the first time since it had arrived, it looked surprised. Admiral Korath leaned forward. Why? It couldn't understand what I was doing. This creature was used to beings that ran from it or fought it with weapons or tried to reason with it. But I was doing something different. Jake sat back down at the table. I wasn't fighting it because I thought I could win. I was fighting it because it had hurt people I loved. There's a difference. The creature could sense this, Captain Hayes asked. Vexthol lived partly in the realm of emotions and thoughts. It could taste my feelings the same way it had tasted everyone else's fear. But my emotions were something it had never encountered before. Jake's voice became quieter. Pure human stubbornness. The refusal to give up even when giving up is the smart thing to do. The willingness to fight impossible battles because someone has to. Admiral Korath made a rumbling sound deep in his throat. This hurt the entity. It confused it first. Then it started to hurt it. My punches weren't doing physical damage, but they were doing something else. They were proving that it wasn't as powerful as it thought. Jake touched one of his deeper scars. Vexthol grabbed me and threw me across the square. I hit a building, so hard that I left a crater in the wall. Every bone in my body should have been broken. But you got back up, Captain Hayes said. I got back up. And I ran at it again. Jake was quiet for a moment, remembering. The battle went on for 2 hours. Vexthul would knock me down, burn me, freeze me, hit me with attacks that rewrote reality around me. But every time I got back up and came at it again. What was the creature doing during this time? Admiral Korath asked. Getting frustrated, then angry, then something I think might have been afraid. Jake smiled grimly. It started making mistakes, using more power than it needed to, attacking wildly instead of with precision. Captain Hayes looked at her notes. The evacuation shuttles, were they able to escape during the battle? Jake's smile faded. Most of them, yes. Vexthul was too focused on me to pay attention to the ships launching, but not all of them made it out in time. He was quiet for a long moment. Amy and Sophie were on the last shuttle, he finally said. Vexthul saw it launching and fired at it. I tried to get between them, but I was too far away. Admiral Korath and Captain Hayes waited. The shuttle exploded before it reached orbit. Everyone on board died instantly. Jake's voice was barely above a whisper. I watched my family die while I was fighting to save them. Captain Hayes reached across the table and squeezed Jake's hand. I'm sorry. That's when everything changed, Jake said. Up until that moment, I was fighting to protect people. After I watched that shuttle explode, I was fighting for revenge. Admiral Korath looked concerned. What happened? Jake looked up at them with eyes that held old pain and older anger. I stopped holding back, and Vexthul learned what happens when you make a human truly angry. Jake's hands trembled slightly as he continued his story. Admiral Korath and Captain Hayes could see the pain in his eyes, but also something else, a fire that had never been completely put out. When I saw Amy and Sophie die, something broke inside me, Jake said. But something else woke up, something I didn't know humans could feel. Captain Hayes was still holding his hand. What do you mean? Pure rage. Not anger at being hurt or frustrated. Something deeper. The kind of fury that comes from losing everything that gives your life meaning. Jake stood and walked to the corner of the room. Vexthul sensed the change immediately. It had been feeding on fear and pain for thousands of years, but this was something new. Admiral Korath made notes on his tablet. How did the creature react? It laughed at first. It thought my anger would make me sloppy, easier to kill. But human anger isn't like other species' anger. When we get truly mad, we don't lose control, we become more focused. Jake turned back to face them. I stopped trying to punch Vexthul. Instead, I started targeting its weak points, the places where different dimensions connected to its body. How did you know where these weak points were? Captain Hayes asked. I could see them. The rage had changed something in my vision. I could see the lines where reality bent around, the creature, the spots where it was vulnerable. Jake sat back down at the table. I started using pieces of the destroyed buildings as weapons. Metal beams, chunks of concrete, anything I could lift. But I wasn't just throwing them. I was aiming for the dimensional weak points. Admiral Korath looked impressed despite himself. Did it work? Better than anything else had. Each hit made Vexthul scream. Its form started to become less solid. The starfire in its body began to flicker. Jake's voice became stronger as he remembered the turning point. That's when the creature made its first real mistake. It tried to use my grief against me. What do you mean? Captain Hayes asked. It created illusions of Amy and Sophie, made them appear next to me, crying, asking why I hadn't saved them, begging me to stop fighting and join them in death. Jake's scarred hands clenched. Vexthul thought this would break my will to fight. It had used similar tactics on others, but it misunderstood what human love actually means. Admiral Korath leaned forward. How so? Love doesn't make us weak. It makes us stronger. Seeing those fake images of my family just reminded me why I was fighting. Not for revenge anymore, but to make sure no other families would suffer like mine had. Jake stood up again and began pacing. I grabbed the largest piece of debris I could find, a section of the colony's main support beam, and drove it straight through Vexthul's center mass. That killed it? Captain Hayes asked. No. but it hurt it badly enough that it couldn't maintain its physical form. It started to dissolve back into shadow and energy. I thought it was retreating. Jake stopped pacing and faced them. But Vexthul had one last attack. It began to pull itself together for a final strike that would have destroyed the entire planet. Admiral Korath's eyes widened. "What did you do?" "The only thing I could think of. I ran to the colony's fusion reactor and started an overload sequence." Captain Hayes almost dropped her tablet. "You were going to cause a nuclear explosion?" "Not nuclear. Fusion, much bigger. The reactor was designed to power the entire colony. If it went critical, it would release enough energy to vaporize everything within 50 miles. Jake sat back down and looked at his scarred hands. "I calculated that the explosion would happen before Vexthul could complete its final attack. The creature would be destroyed, and the remaining evacuation shuttles would be far enough away to survive. But you would die in the explosion, Admiral," Korath said. "That was the plan. I had lost everything that mattered to me. At least my death would serve a purpose." Jake was quiet for a moment. "I activated the overload and then ran back to where Vexthul was gathering itself together. I wasn't going to let it escape at the last second." Captain Hayes was writing quickly. "What happened next?" "I jumped onto the creature's reforming body and held on. It tried to shake me off, but I wrapped my arms around what passed for its neck and squeezed as hard as I could." Jake touched the deepest scar on his arm. "Vexthul burned me with everything it had left. Fire that existed in colors I can't name, cold that froze parts of my soul, pain that carved itself into dimensions I didn't know existed. But you held on," Admiral Korath said. "I held on, and I talked to it while we waited for the reactor to explode." Captain Hayes looked up. "You talked to it?" "I told it about Amy. How she would sing while she worked in the garden, how she made the best coffee in the sector, how she cried when she was happy and laughed when she was nervous." Jake's voice became softer. "I told it about Sophie, how she collected rocks from every planet we visited, how she wanted to be a starship captain when she grew up, how she gave names to all the stars she could see from her bedroom window." "Why did you do that?" Admiral Korath asked gently. "Because I wanted Vexthul to understand what it had destroyed. It had killed thousands of people, but to it, they were just sources of fear and pain. I wanted it to know that every person it killed had been someone's entire world." Jake looked up at them. "The fusion reactor exploded while I was still holding onto Vexthul. The blast should have killed both of us instantly." Captain Hayes leaned forward. "But you survived. I woke up 3 days later in a coalition medical ship. The rescue teams had found me in a crater 50 feet deep. My body was burned in ways that the doctors said were impossible." Jake rolled up his sleeves again to show them the scars. "These marks exist in 11 different dimensions simultaneously. Some of them are still healing 3 years later, but they're healing in realities that I can't access." Admiral Korath studied the scars carefully. "What happened to Vexthul?" "Gone. The explosion combined with the dimensional damage I had caused sent it back to whatever realm it came from. The doctor said the energy readings showed that it would take thousands of years for something like that to reform." Jake sat back in his chair. "The official report said the planet was destroyed by seismic activity. The truth was classified to prevent panic. Most people don't know that creatures like Vexthul exist." Captain Hayes closed her tablet. "How many people did you save?" 58,000 made it off planet before the final explosion. The other 2,000 died in the battle, including Amy and Sophie." Jake's voice became very quiet. "I saved almost 60,000 strangers and lost the 2 people who meant everything to me." Admiral Korath reached across the table and put a massive paw on Jake's shoulder. "You did what you had to do." "Did I?" Jake asked. "Sometimes I wonder if there was another way. If I had been smarter, or faster, or stronger." "You fought a god, and won," Captain Hayes said firmly. "You saved 60,000 lives, that matters." Jake nodded slowly. "The Coalition gave me a medical discharge and a pension. I've spent the last 3 years moving from planet to planet, trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life." "And now you want to rejoin the military?" Admiral Korath asked. Jake looked at his scarred hands one more time. I want to do something useful. These scars aren't just reminders of what I lost. They're proof that creatures like Vexthal can be beaten. He looked up at them. If there are more of them out there, someone needs to know how to fight them. Admiral Korath and Captain Hayes exchanged glances. They both had the same thought, but neither wanted to be the first to say it out loud. Finally, Admiral Korath spoke. Jake, there's something you need to know. The reason your scanner reading was so important to us. Jake waited. We've detected signs of more entities like Vexthal moving toward Coalition space. Your battle on Kepler 442b may have been just the beginning. Jake stared at Admiral Korath for a long moment. The words seemed to echo in the small room. More entities like Vexthal were coming. How many? Jake asked. Captain Hayes activated her tablet and showed him a star chart. Red dots marked locations throughout Coalition space. Our deep space sensors have detected at least 12 similar energy signatures. They're moving slowly, but they're definitely heading toward inhabited systems. Admiral Korath pointed to different areas of the map. The Rigel sector, the Vega colonies, even systems close to Earth. If these creatures are anything like the one you fought, millions of people could die. Jake studied the map. Each red dot represented potential disaster on the scale of what had happened to Kepler 442b. How long do we have? The closest one will reach the Centauri system in about 8 months, Captain Hayes said. The others are spread out over the next 2 years. Jake leaned back in his chair. He had spent 3 years trying to forget the battle with Vexthal. Now it seemed like that fight had been preparation for something much larger. What does the Coalition plan to do about it? He asked. Admiral Korath made a growling sound. Our best weapons and strongest warriors have proven useless against deity-class entities. We've run simulations based on your battle reports. Conventional forces would be slaughtered. Captain Hayes nodded. We've tried everything. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, even experimental reality disruptors. The computer models all show the same result: total defeat. Jake looked at his scarred hands. But you think I might be able to help? You're the only person who has ever fought one of these creatures and won, Admiral Korath said. Your experience is literally unique in the galaxy. Captain. Hayes leaned forward. We want to offer you command of a new unit, Project Defiance. It would be designed specifically to face the incoming threat. Jake was quiet for a moment. What kind of unit? Admiral Korath activated a holographic projector in the center of the table. Images appeared showing different humans from across Coalition space. We've been searching for people with unusual resistance to impossible situations. Humans who have survived things they shouldn't have been able to survive. The first image showed a woman with short blonde hair. Lieutenant Maria Santos. She was the only survivor when her ship fell into a black hole. According to physics, she should have been stretched into atoms. Instead, she walked out of the wreckage, with only minor injuries. The next image was a tall man with kind eyes. Dr. Richard Hayes. He was exposed to a virus that rewrites DNA. It should have killed him in minutes. Instead, he developed immunity and created a cure that saved his entire colony. More images followed. Sergeant Kevin Murphy survived being hit by lightning 7 times in 1 hour during a freak storm on Proxima 3. Engineer Lisa Carter walked through a radiation field that should have been instantly lethal. Jake studied each face. What do these people have in common? Captain Hayes smiled. They're all human, and they all refuse to give up when any reasonable person would have accepted defeat. Admiral Korath manipulated the projector to show a new facility. We've built a training center on a classified world. The best scientists in the Coalition have been developing new weapons and tactics based on your battle data. What kind of weapons? Jake asked. The hologram showed strange-looking devices that seemed to bend light around them. Dimensional disruptors that can affect multiple realities simultaneously. Emotion field generators that can project human determination as a weapon. Reality anchors that prevent deity-class entities from bending space-time. Jake was impressed despite himself. Do they work? We don't know, Captain Hayes admitted. We haven't been able to test them against real targets. That's where you would come in. Admiral Korath changed the hologram to show the training facility. You would be in charge of developing tactics and training the team. Your experience fighting, Vexthul would guide everything we do. Jake stood up and walked around the room. The offer was tempting but also terrifying. He had barely survived one battle with a deity-class entity. Could he really face more of them? What makes you think the others would follow me? He asked. They don't know me. Captain Hayes smiled. They know your story. We've shared your battle. Reports with all the candidates. They're eager to learn from the only human who has ever defeated a god. Jake stopped pacing and faced them. You said there are 12 entities coming. Even if we can defeat one or two, what about the others? Admiral Korath's expression became serious. That's where the larger plan comes in. We're not just building one team. We're creating a template that can be copied across the coalition. The hologram showed multiple training facilities on different worlds. If Project Defiance succeeds, we'll train similar units throughout coalition space. Humans who can teach other species how to fight impossible battles. Jake looked at the map again. All those red dots, all those potential disasters. Why humans? What makes us different from other species? Captain Hayes stood up and joined him at the hologram. Every other species in the coalition is more advanced than humanity in some way. The Vorthak are smarter. The Ursani are stronger. The Luminites have technology we can barely understand. But, Admiral Korath continued, no other species has what humans call stubbornness, the refusal to accept defeat even when defeat is logical. Jake nodded. He had felt that stubbornness during his battle with Vexthul, the absolute refusal to give up even when giving up made perfect sense. Most species fight until the odds become impossible, then they retreat or surrender. Captain Hayes explained. Humans fight until they win or die. There's no middle ground. Admiral Korath activated a new display showing psychological profiles. We've studied human behavior in desperate situations. Humans consistently perform beyond their physical and mental limits when protecting others. Jake studied the data. It showed examples from human history and recent conflicts. Humans charging impossible positions. Humans holding defensive lines against overwhelming odds. Humans sacrificing themselves to save strangers. The deity-class entities are used to fighting, species that behave logically, Captain Hayes said. They don't know how to handle opponents who refuse to be logical. Jake thought about his final moments with Vexthul. The creature had been confused by his behavior. It couldn't understand why he kept fighting when fighting was pointless. What would happen if I said no? Jake asked. Admiral Korath sighed. We would do our best with conventional forces. Millions of people would probably die. The coalition might survive, but it would be badly damaged. Captain Hayes put her hand on Jake's arm. We're not ordering you to do this. After what you've been through, no one would blame you for walking away. Jake looked at his scarred hands again. Each mark was a reminder of the price he had paid to save 60,000 strangers. Amy and Sophie had died so those people could live. If I do this, I want full authority over the team, Jake said. No interference from politicians or bureaucrats. Admiral, Korath nodded. Done. I want the best equipment and support the coalition can provide, Jake continued. You'll have it, Captain Hayes promised, and I want honest reports about what we're facing. No classified information kept from the team. If we're going to fight gods, we need to know everything. Admiral Korath and Captain Hayes exchanged glances. Agreed, the Admiral said. Jake looked at the hologram showing the training facility one more time. Then he looked at the star chart with its red dots marking incoming threats. Amy always said I was too stubborn for my own good, he said quietly. I guess we're about to find out if that's true. He turned to face them. When do we start? Captain Hayes smiled. The transport to the training facility leaves tomorrow morning. The other team members are already there waiting for you. Admiral. Korath stood up and extended his massive paw. Welcome to Project Defiance, Commander Miller. Jake shook the alien's hand. I hope you know what you're doing, Admiral. So do I, Admiral Korath replied. So do I. As they left the briefing room, Jake caught sight of his reflection in the polished metal walls. The scars on his arms seemed to glow faintly in the artificial light. For the first time in 3 years, they didn't just remind him of what he had lost. They reminded him of what he had accomplished. 60,000 people were alive because one stubborn human had refused to give up. Now it was time to find out if that same stubbornness could save millions more. The gods were coming, but humanity would be ready for them.